What's happening, WynnAtLove crew? It's the Wynn family.
Hey gang.
Hey gang. And we are back with, let's say, part 2 of this series of how we met.
Woo!
So, in this series, well, in this video, we're going to be talking about our courtship. So, take it away, baby.
Me? Oh, okay. So, after we met and we started dating, you know, some people did ask, like, you know, when did y'all know each other was one? When did y'all know, you know, the timing and all this other stuff? So, Charles and I, we process information differently, and we talked about this over the course of our courtship. So the way that I process information is I see big picture and the little details get filled in as time goes on. He processes information like a Rubik's Cube, like how does this match with this? And I made another analogy. If both of us were to buy a phone right now, I'm the type of person who, you know, I would go to a reputable, you know, manufacturer. Okay, Apple makes good phones. Does it do what I need it to do? The big basics, again, big picture. Okay, calls, the texts, you know, all this other stuff. If there's any other little things, I can probably get it in the App Store. How he would buy a phone is he would read the terms and conditions, the warranty. He's like, okay, that's great. But hold on, what's the terms and conditions? I have to read and this is how he is with everything. Like, he has to know the fine details of everything. He has to read things line by line to make sure that he is certain of his purchase, certain of his decision, and that's how he makes decisions, right? So, when we first started dating, I knew he was the one rather quickly. Now, there were still some things I didn't know enough about him, you know, or certain things that we had to fill in the gaps about. But for the most part, I would say after a few weeks of like dating consistently, you know, and praying about it and having peace, and, you know, God's like, hey, look at his character. Hey, that's my guy. That's Charles. And I said, all right, you are really rooting for this man. And you are really rooting for us to be together. And I see your hand of grace heavily upon us. Amen. So I know that you're in this. So I knew he was the one after a few weeks of dating, after I vetted him. And when the Lord was like giving me confirmation on top of confirmation, was vouching for him and for us, was rooting for us. When I knew God was rooting for us, it hit different. You know, there's one thing if you're just dating someone and you just are just dating them over there. It's another thing when God is like, I want y'all to win. And I said, #winning. So, I would say, what? Oh.
So cute.
I would say that that was the only, I guess, like, difficulty. Well, one of the difficulties between us was because, I mean, I'm here, but Charles, he had to take his time to vet me. Like, he knew what he felt, but he didn't want to rush past his own process. Like, he had to walk it out step by step by step by step, because I'm like, it wasn't that I was trying to rush anything, or like I wasn't trying to rush into marriage. It was more so of like, okay, is this like are we official? Like, what are we doing? He's like, well, you know, it only has been a few months. And I'm like, a few months of like, you only dated me. Like, what are we talking about here? Like, he said, oh, you want me to marry you? And I'm like, I never said that. What are we saying here? But Charles, he takes dating seriously. He doesn't do it recreationally. Right. If he commits to a woman, it's because he wants to marry her.
100%, yeah.
You know, so I mean, I'll let you take it away from there.
Yeah. I do. As she said, I have never ever dated recreationally. When I have committed to a woman in a relationship, and I say, hey, we are together, it is exclusively because we have a future together. That's why. So as I began, getting to know Jumoke here, she was such an awesome woman. I had to take my time to vet her. And vetting her character, who she was, her spirit, who she was as a woman of God, and having to have a true understanding, who she is and how consistent is that? How reliable is she? Right? When this happens, when that happens in this situation, how is she when she upset? How is she when she mad? When we're having a disagreement, or maybe there's some contending, maybe there's a bit of confrontation, or maybe there's a bit of friction in between us. How is she handling these situations? How has she submitted herself to Christ as a woman of God, as a daughter? How has she submitted herself to the Father, right? And how has that enabled her to show up in a marriage, and how she would have submitted herself to her husband? I had to vet all of that, and that took a bit of time. Knowing who I am, knowing how I have been, understanding I have no desire to divorce. I have no desire for issues, unnecessary issues, and problematic things that arise within the relationship, because everyone knows life happens, and life will bring you challenges. When life brings you lemons, make lemonade. However, I had no desire to have any of that in our marriage or in our relationship. So before I knew that I was going to commit to her in a relationship, in my head, I knew relationship equaled marriage. I knew that.
But to me, it didn't. That's why I was like, what are we talking about? Now, wait, babe, are you done? I'm sorry.
I would say she had no idea. This is how I operate. A relationship, especially who I was and how I had gotten to be there, a relationship equaled marriage. Like, I would not have gotten into a relationship with her if marriage was not on the table. So when we were having conversations, and she's inquiring about, a relationship, and I'm like, a relationship equals marriage. I'm like, you're asking me to marry you. And she's like, no, I'm not. But she didn't have understanding. She didn't have the understanding that I had, as a man, especially as a man of Christ, who is in a position for a family, who is in a position for marriage, who is in a position to move forward in his life. Whoever I committed myself to, marriage is the only outcome. So that's how I was operating throughout our courtship. How we are in this courtship is how we will be in marriage. And I have no desire to rush this process. And I want to ensure that we have a solid foundation to move forward with into marriage, should, the vetting of you and the Holy Spirit align. And that's what happened.
I wanted to add, okay, as we're talking about this whole thing about relationships, it wasn't necessarily that I wanted a relationship. Now, if any one of y'all have been following me for a while, I did not get joy from being a girlfriend, right? That was not my end goal. That was not like, oh, I just want to be his girlfriend. No, I've always said I'm a wife. It's he who finds a wife. He didn't find a girlfriend. He didn't find a girl. He found a wife. So I knew I was a wife. And I don't care for relationships as they are today.
She held herself as a wife also.
Yeah, and he knew, I'm not here for jokes and giggles. I don't actually, oh, that's your little girlfriend. I don't care. For me, what I wanted more so was more of a assurance that, I wanted assurance and security. That's what I wanted. Not necessarily just a relationship or a courtship. It's I wanted something of hey, you feel a type of way about me, this is moving towards marriage. You know what I'm saying? Like how, because in my experience, because I believe that I'm a woman of quality, you know, I've never had the experience of having to wait a couple months for like, you know, a courtship, or like usually men want to commit to me by like what, the first, second week of meeting me and dating me. You know what I'm saying? So I was very confused. I'm like, what's the problem? Right? Like, what's the problem? Like, you like me? What's the problem? Like, so I would say things didn't really shift in our relationship. I think one thing that's really important about our testimony is how patient God was with both of us, and how much he respected both of our processes. Because even though I'm talking about, you know, his process, like I don't feel a type of way against his process. I think that Charles is very wise. You know, I think the way we think is just different. One isn't better than the other. So God knows how I am, but God also knew how Charles was. And as much as God was walking with me, God was also walking with Charles, you know, every step of the vetting process. So I do think that there is something to be said about vetting people for their character. You know, knowing 100%. What you're getting yourself into. I think that people don't vet, really. And I talk about this on my page a lot now because, you know, people don't have standards. And because they don't have standards, they don't have anything to vet another person on. It's just you meet something good and you settle because it was something good. But there's a difference between browsing for something and you casually find something good versus knowing what you want, having a certain set of standards, finding exactly what you want, vetting it to make sure that it's exactly what you wanting and receiving it. Mm-hmm. You know. Mm-hmm. So, you know, at first I didn't have understanding. I'm like, why is he moving like this, right? But I will say though, in knowing me and knowing Charles, the way that God was leading both of us, it's like he met us in the middle. God told me from the beginning when Charles and I was dating, be patient. 1, very clearly, be patient. And 2, let him lead the relationship. So it's not like I was arguing with him. We don't argue.
Yeah, we don't.
We disagree, but we don't argue.
Yeah, we don't argue.
I said, all right, that's where he is. That's where he's at. God will get it, right? So I let him go through his process. I didn't nag him. I didn't push. When you gonna marry me? When we gonna do this? When we gonna?
Yeah, not at all.
I did not do that at all. I literally just submitted to his pace of the relationship, and I didn't say nothing. Besides making my desires known from the first like 2 weeks that we were dating. Like I told him what I wanted. I never really spoke of it again, but at least I told him. After, I would say, 4 months of vetting, God came to me. Now that's why I said, see, God was trying to like be patient with both of us, but at the same time he was like, all right, what are we doing? Y'all have vetted each other. What is going on? And he encouraged me. He said, hey, y'all have been really doing, obviously I'm paraphrasing, God didn't say this to me verbatim, but this is just, you know, my relationship with God. In so many words, it's like we had done the groundwork and the practical work of our process, like vetting. You know, we've asked all the questions. We did the equivalent to premarital counseling, just without an actual counselor. We talked about the future. We talked about finances. We talked about roles. We talked about visions and plans for the future. We talked about business. We talked about femininity, masculinity. We talked about timelines. Like we talked about
the whole,
you know what I'm saying? Anything that you can vet a person on, we did it. After we did all of that, and it's like, God was like, okay, can we actually start coming into agreement spiritually, right? So that's what the Lord told me. So I suggested to Charles, I said, hey, once a week, can we like pray together and worship together? We hadn't done that yet. Right. And Charles was like, all right, sure. Charles was just, okay, sure. And weekly we would read the Bible, we would worship, we would pray together. And the more we began to pray together, and we began to even prophesy together, it's like we were coming into agreement spiritually with what God was doing within us, right? So we laid the natural foundation, but now it was time to lay the spiritual foundation. And we did that for the next, couple months until we got married.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for the last 2 months up until marriage. Yeah, we were, let's say, cultivating and I guess fleshing out, unionizing within the spirit.
Yeah, basically. We're like God said, okay, the Bible says in Amos 3:3, how can two walk together unless they agree? We already agreed on almost everything, right?
Yeah, right, in the natural, yeah.
We agreed on everything in the natural. It's like, okay, can we agree in the spirit?
In the spirit, right.
And once we started doing that, that's when the acceleration took off.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, it was actually kind of slow, and I was like, I just kept going back to God, and I'm like, man, like I enjoyed being with him. I enjoyed dating him. We went on great dates. He would spoil me, all that stuff. But I'm like,
we had a great time.
How many more days we gonna go on until I get some assurance? Like, what are we doing, right? Like, what are we doing? But once we started to come into agreement spiritually, things started to take off quickly. That's when it was like.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so that's our courtship.
Yeah, so I do want to touch on the natural and the spirit. So we went on several dates as I was courting her.
We went on a date at least minimum once a week.
Once a week.
Sometimes
on
twice.
average.
Yeah,
right. Sometimes twice. Once a week on average. As I said, how we were during the courtship was how we were going to be in marriage. So I had in my mind, this is how I'm ensuring that I will have who I want to be with and how I want to operate and lead who I'm with, right? How are we together? I told her, hey, not only did I tell her, but we actually did, as we said, 1 day a week on average, sometimes 2, and especially in the beginning, it was like 3-4 dates in a week. And then as we were having a great time, going out, having a good time together. You have to be able to hang out with your partner, right?
I'll hang out.
Yeah, you have to be able to do that. I knew I wanted to do that, and then in addition to that, as we talked about our values, as we talked about our future, our vision, our goals, how we saw our roles, how we saw our families, as we talked about business together, as we talked about, just our walk and what our future looked like. Everything was aligning. Everything was aligning in the natural. And it was like, holy smokes, this is, honestly, I almost felt like it was sort of kind of, it had to be inspired by God because of how seamless everything was in terms of the alignment of values and the alignment of vision and the alignment of goals and the alignment of desires and how we wanted to live our life and how we wanted to portray ourselves moving forward to the world. And she presented the spiritual walk to me, said, hey, we have an understanding of each other. God is saying to me, what's happening with this spiritual walk? This is my interpretation of how she came to me. What's happening with this spiritual walk?
What we doing?
Right. What's up with this? I would like us to pray, worship, and read scripture together once a week. And I had never had that before. And I said, holy smokes. Okay.
All right.
Let's have it. Like, that was an first indication to me. Well, let's say, maybe not first indication because, we had such alignment in the natural. But when she brought the spiritual in and like, hey, let's do this, I said, oh, snap. We here. Like, we are coming from the clouds into the ground and we're starting to till like the soil and actually cultivate this relationship in a real way, talking about the spirit. And I said, holy smokes. And then moving forward, we worshiped, we prayed, and we read scripture together on a weekly basis. And as she said, that took us from 100 to 1,000 rapidly. And our union in the spirit, as we came closer and closer to becoming one in the spirit over those 2 months, I would say that's how we came to be how we are today. The catalyst, boom, after the natural foundation was laid, we flicked the switch on for the spiritual cultivation and that spiritual laying. And that put us together like a tightrope. And here we are.
Yeah, and then he started to get excited for our little worship nights.
I did.
I was putting him on. I was putting him on like to worship music. And here's even I don't know if this is a tip or just like a word of encouragement to women, because I know someone had asked me before, like, they asked me about dating and about being a alpha woman or a powerhouse or something. Let me just tell you right now, I'm not an alpha woman. I'm a feminine woman. I'm a leader, right? And I am firm in my relationship with God. I can be intimidating to some people, but I'm not hard or whatever the heck. So how I handled Charles, and maybe for you, because Charles was not the same level spiritually as I was when we got together, but he, over time, right? He just rapidly this is my suggestion to you as a woman. Do not manipulate a man. Do not backlead him. There's a feminine grace that you have to be able to suggest things to a man. Remember, the man is the head, but the woman is the entire body, including the neck. So I didn't have to be like, we're doing this. So I'll be like, hey, babe, I think God is telling me this. Like, can we do this together? Okay, sure. I said, okay, do you mind if we do this? Even when it came to reading the word, I said, you pick the book. You're the head. You pick whatever we're reading. And, Charles loves the word. He loved the word, man. Like, we need to do a little TikTok of like how it is like when we're doing Bible study. He's like, yeah, baby, read that verse to me again. Okay, in the beginning, like, he's such an African preacher for real. Every 2 words. Yeah, but babe, you're not getting it though. This is what they said. And I'm like, but I would say that the fire starts to really burn in him. And, but I'm saying all this to say, a lot of women who find themselves in a position that they may be a bit more spiritually ahead of the man, don't let pride be your undoing. Still remain humble. There was never a point in time in our journey that I led Charles or backled him. I would just make a suggestion, put it to the table. Hey, babe, what do you think about this? And Charles, being so humble, okay, sure, that sounds like a good idea. He didn't even know what was coming. He had no idea. He had no idea. Or I would ask him, I said, babe, can you prophesy to me? Okay, sure. I'll ask him, I said, babe, like, my back is hurting. Can you pray for it? Okay, sure. And just over time, then after that, it's like, I didn't even have to ask him. I had a whole, meltdown with my hair and a hairstylist the other day. And he just came, laid hands on my scalp, and he prayed over my scalp, for it to be restored. But I'm just saying little things like that, like just remain humble, because headship and submission is not about competency, it's about calling. Preston Perry and Jackie O'Perry had a whole video about that. And throughout the entire process, I always respected him as my head and even potential head. So there was never a point in time of like, I'm better than him. He doesn't know what he's doing. Pride will be your undoing. As a feminine woman, remain humble and remain submitted. You know, first to God while you guys are courting, but also like, you know, practice submission, you know, to your husband, even in courting. That's what I would say. You have anything to add?
What I have to say is when you have a courtship and you are, let's say you're embarking upon a courtship with, you know, as a man of God, with a woman of God, once you have realized, hey, you have vetted her in the natural 100%, if you have not already had this along in the journey, the spiritual unification is imperative and you know, empirical to your union, right? Moving into marriage, you have to have that. I'll encourage you. I would say, you know, I'm going to encourage you to have both. The same laying in the natural, same vision in the natural, same desires in the natural, and then the unification in the spirit as well. And that is how you have what we have. It's unimaginable. The honey.
Ooh, honey.
That we have here.
Ooh.
And we have unified in the natural and in the spirit, all the grace of God. You know, he has been in this union from the start. We have put Christ first throughout our courtship. We have Christ first today. You know, we have Christ in everything that we do. Even in the making of this video, we have Christ in this.
Woo!
100%.
WynnAtLove.
WynnAtLove.